Welcome to Out of My Mouth, the program where raw thoughts meet unfiltered conversations.
Join us as we dive into the depths of human experience, where we share stories, perspectives, and insights that just might challenge the status quo.
Get ready to laugh, cry, and ponder the world around you like never before. This is Out of My Mouth.
The views and opinions of our guest and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of New Thought Media Network, or any organization we may be affiliated with. Here at New Thought Media Network, we welcome freedom of speech and courageous conversations. There are many topics that can be difficult to navigate. Challenging the status quo and engaging in lively debate is important to expanding our understanding of one another, and life in general. Creating a peaceful world doesn't happen because no one disagrees, it happens from a willingness to understanding one another. In our programming, we strive to expand consciousness and assist people in creating remarkable lives. Your comments are welcome at info@ntmedia.org.
Good afternoon. You come in giggling, Cheryl.
I was just watching the recording in the hands of the animated figure.
Yeah.
So, and then the camera came on, so I was giggling.
Okay. So,
Good morning,
my
good
name is
afternoon.
Mark,
And I'm Cheryl. And it's wonderful.
and welcome
to have you here and to be here.
Out of My Mouth. Are we on a time lapse there, my dear?
I don't know.
Well,
Okay.
let me just start by acknowledging and showing gratitude for the people that came before us and the land that we are on. If you just take a few moments with me. In the spirit of reconciliation and peace, we are grateful for the opportunity to meet on these sacred lands. We thank the generations of people who have taken care of the land for thousands of years. We recognize our oneness. We realize our history. We choose to create a new reality. We are one. Miigwech.
Miigwech. Thank you, Mark. It is now my privilege to introduce you to our wonderful guest speaker today, Cheryl Pauchuck. Is that how you say it?
I don't know. She can correct us.
Yeah.
You're close.
Say it again.
Pauchuck.
Oh, Pauchuck. Pauchuck. Throw the ball. Well, welcome, Cheryl. It's wonderful to have you here. I'll tell our listeners a little bit about you before we begin. Cheryl is a life, spiritual, and mindfulness grief coach, a Reiki Master, Kundalini yoga teacher, and spiritual practitioner. She combines these modalities to create processes that promote healings on all levels. Cheryl works with groups and individuals via her private practice and as a volunteer at her local hospice. She also runs a private mindful grief group on Facebook, which everyone is welcome to join. And additionally, she offers a variety of free resources on her website, which we will be sharing with you as well. And this is another word for me. Currently, Cheryl lives part-time in Ajijic.
Close. Ajijic.
Say that again.
Ajijic.
Ajijic. Thank you. In Mexico, where she's coming to us from. And Marg and I were just having a conversation, and I know I was feeling quite envious, I must say. I love it down there. She has introduced Death Cafés there, which is now a monthly gathering. And she's also a Course in Miracles student teacher and continues to master the realm, to master her own mental muscle and live in the realm of love. Oh my goodness. Wow. I'm breathing that in. And Cheryl's second passion is food. And she's taken her love of it to a more serious note by helping bring community get together with a creative food drive event available to communities across North America through an online platform. So welcome, Cheryl. And my goodness, you do a lot. And I think the planet is blessed by your presence on it.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
Thank you, Cheryl. I just want to kickstart this and say, okay, so this podcast show, whatever, is based on courageous conversations. And talking about grief would not be my first choice of having a conversation, because it's like, oh boy. So
yeah, you and millions and millions and millions of other people.
Yeah. And even just reading the word Death Cafe, like what? Right? So yeah, tell us a little bit about, the fear that we have and what brings people to you.
Yeah, well, to set the stage a little bit, that, death they say is one of the, taboo topics that nobody wants to ever, sit down and be in conversation with. And grief actually trumps that. We want to talk and acknowledge grief more than we want to acknowledge death. So the two obviously go hand in hand. And yeah, and it's awesome.
And it's guaranteed, right? I mean, death is... I said this to my husband the other night. Why don't we, as a society, talk more about death and celebrate people, then really try and brush the topic under the carpet?
Yeah. Well, it's because it's fear, right? It's the big unknown. And, death is for people that are still living, right? It's something that we experience in life, and it's just a part of the life cycle. And it's my belief that, North America, being Canada, the United States, obviously Mexico, it's very different culture around death. More ritual, more celebration, more community around death. And we kind of sweep it under the carpet, and we don't want to talk about it. And, we've even transitioned from having funerals to celebrations of life. So nobody wants to be sad, and nobody wants to be around people who are sad, because we don't know how to handle people who are grieving. So it's, the more and more we, turn our face from it, the bigger the problem becomes. That's, we know with anything, right?
Yeah.
What inspired your interest in this?
Well, it was interesting because I was working along, having clients who were coming to me for Reiki or, prayer and, different modality healings that I do. And COVID hit. So of course, the clients weren't coming through the front door. A lot of them, at early stages, they weren't Zoom people, and, people weren't figuring out how to convert their business to a virtual capacity. So I was just sitting down saying, okay, it looks like I might have to reinvent myself here, and just really having a look at my clients and why they were coming, when we get down to the root cause of, their unhappiness or their dis-ease in their body or whatever it was. A huge percentage, I'd say, 90+%, it's all grief, and there's a big misconception with grief, that we only grieve when somebody we love dies. And that's not true. So we grieve our whole life. We experience losses through our whole life. As kids, our friends move away, or, we get in fights, and maybe they might still live down the street, but that friendship is, broken down. We might have grandparents that die. We lose pets. We graduate from public school and go to high school, and we graduate from that and we go to university, and all of those are, momentum forward movements of life. We still grieve. We grieve, being the big kid, on campus. We grieve because our friends go off to different schools and we're not together. So we grieve all kinds of things, but we never identify that that's grief. And we just know that we're not happy. We've got these muddled, feelings and thoughts in our head. We're not eating, we're not sleeping, we might be depressed, whole different things. So it's the root cause was really grief. And when I kind of hit, that one underlying point with my clients, I was like, I need to look into this a lot deeper than, what's happening here, so I can train myself, not only for my own self, because I was grieving the loss of my business. I was grieving not being with, being able to see my family. My family lives 3 hours away, so they were in a completely different bubble than the one I had, where I lived. So, we just all experienced so much grief during COVID, and people didn't realize what it was. So, and then I got involved with our community hospice, which obviously our focus is death. And as we know, so many people were, dying either from, COVID or just from other things, but we couldn't be there for our loved ones. We were cut off, communication was cut off. We couldn't go to hospitals. We had no funerals. So, we were actually in a pandemic of grief. So the fallout of, COVID has put a whole new layer of unresolved grief on our platform.
Yeah. That's amazing. I was actually also thinking about that the other day, how bizarre, like when you think about it and you look back, it's just like, it just feels like crazy, to I don't know, to isolate people and not let them see their loved ones, and not let them even have the choice to bury a loved one, or, something like that. Like that to me must have been the hardest thing for many, many people, people with families in hospital or who needed health care, or, so even grieving your health, right? And not being the same. I was thinking while you were talking, one can even grieve aging, grieve the way we used to be so mobile and what's the word? Yeah, so grief can hit us from all areas, and we don't think about it and we don't talk about it.
No. Well, and grief, we always associate, like I said, usually first with death or, divorce, the two big ones. But there's a whole list of, I think every institute has like 40 different loss experiences that we go through a lifetime. And there's probably, umbrella, experiences under each one of those headings. But there, when we don't identify it as a loss and the grief from that, we at the Institute identify grief as a loss of any kind that changes our habit, our daily patterns, our routine.
Yeah.
So just even going to work, like that commute, we're not doing that anymore. We're not having coffee with our peers. We're not going to lunch with our clients. Not having that me time away from families.
Yeah.
Right? Just so many things came out of being isolated at home, and we're not supposed to be alone, right?
No, we're not.
Women.
Yeah, yeah,
and
definitely.
That's a big myth about grief is we've been programmed to grieve alone. And one of the worst things we can do, because we just isolate ourselves even more when what we really need is to be in community with a bunch of people who are going to love and support us, and help us get through it.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't, we suppress a lot because people don't want to see us sad or crying or even angry, because that's a part of grieving, the grieving process. They're just not, we as a people, society, is not comfortable dealing with emotions, actually, any emotion.
Yeah, it's so true. And you mentioned that I host Death Cafés both back at home and here in Mexico. And people are like, Death Cafés? Like, why do I want to go to one of those? But I challenge everybody to find one. There are lots online, and there's probably one in your community somewhere. But I can almost guarantee you it'll be one of the most fascinating conversations that you actually ever engage in, because we just come together and talk about our experiences with death and anything under that umbrella. And, you know, it helps normalize the conversation about death. You know, it speaks to the elephant in the room, if you will. And that's their purpose, right? It's just to normalize that conversation. And when we can do that with strangers, it makes it easier to go home and have these, you know, tough love conversations with our families. So,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, a Death Cafe is a wonderful experience. I encourage you to attend one or start one. You don't need any special skills to start one up in your community.
Oh, I love that. We could have a Death Cafe spirit group, Marg.
There you go.
It's interesting. I'm guessing that through marrying up what you said about spirit group, I find within the spirit groups, there's an education with each and every participant that comes into the spirit group. So I'm guessing with the Death Cafés, somebody may say something, oh, I never thought of that before, right? And take you down another train of thought. One of the things that you said when you were talking earlier, sorry, I'm a little bit slow in thinking here right now. You said mindful, and that's such a powerful thing. I've been thinking about this whole process, that one needs to be mindful, because for myself, I may not know that I'm experiencing grief. So going into a mindful practice, learning about what you are experiencing will bring this forward, I guess. And ergo, mindful grieving.
Yes. Well, it's when we're connected and we're in tune with our bodies and our emotions and our feelings and what's, you know, our experiences, you know, that's half the battle, right? Is just acknowledging and then being with grief, right? Instead of, like we were just saying, suppressing it, right? Because we don't have tools. We don't have the right tools in our toolbox to navigate grief, either as a griever or as someone trying to support somebody who's grieving, right? Our tendency is like, oh my God, that's like a mess. I just, you know, I'm going over here. And unfortunately, we lose a lot of friendships and relationships when someone is experiencing a huge wave of grief from a big loss, because we don't have the tools. Right? It's really just about not having the tools. And to me, mindfulness is you know, going within to see what's there and showing up as a better person for yourself and for others.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the, I mean, there are some real challenges that families have to deal with if we don't actually, you know, talk about death or talk about when we die, where things are, and if we don't have a will, you know, all those kinds of things. And I know somebody who that happened to. Her mom passed away and nothing was in order. And she really, on top of her grief, struggled with, you know, everything she had to deal with the estate and the will and all that kind of thing. And in fact, she actually had wrote and put together a will book, you know, an advisory book, and what you need to know and how you need to prepare and, you know, the information you need to leave behind and all these kinds of things, because a lot of people, we know that we're going to die, but we don't prepare for it.
That's right.
We procrastinate. We know that we should and we need to, but for some reason it's like, oh, I'll do it later. I'll do it then. I'll do it. and then comes and it wasn't done.
Yeah. A lot of hospice organizations have books of different names, but a lot of them seem to be called Getting Your Ducks in a Row, that just provide pages and pages of where you can record information like, where's the key to the safety deposit box? Here's all my credit cards and here's all my passwords, where my will is, here's my doctor's information, here's my lawyer's information. Here's a list of people I want you to contact. And I challenge people on a mindfulness capacity to go past that, right? And we facilitate workshops kind of involving an art piece, but we'll lead them through a guided meditation on envisioning what their last, few days look like. And how do you want your death to be? As much as, we can control that. Want to be at home? Do you want to be in a hospital? Do you want to be in hospice? Who do you want there? Who do you not want there?
Yeah.
Do you want someone to come in and paint your room purple and have fresh daisies there? Do you want music? Do you want someone to read to you? What's your favorite podcast? To document all these things. And then to look after your legacy. Just the little things, like who gets the shortbread recipe? Who gets to carve the turkey at Christmas? Like all these little things that are your roles within a family. Who do you pass that on to? Right? So there's so much you can think about and kind of have fun with. I have a dear friend back at home who is creating gifts. She's painting a painting for each one of her grandkids and her kids that they will get after she passes. Written a letter for each of them, a personalized letter. She's written her own eulogy. She's picked out her readings and what songs she wants. We can be so prepared, and we can make it fun, right? I mean, you're not going to be at the party, but you can plan a great party.
Yeah. And it's a gift. I think it's a gift to your children. If you don't have children, your loved ones, anybody that's left behind, I think it's a real gift to them.
Yeah. Yeah. To have your death plan, to have your funeral arrangements made and, have your POAs and your executors all in line. So important to do that. Because when that person, does die, like you said, the last thing you want to be doing is, making phone calls and running around doing paperwork, which unfortunately, the Canadian government system isn't overly compassionate. So there's things that need to get done. But
and not knowing where things are and missing things because you didn't even know they existed.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Just to get it all in order and make it fun, right? Just pick a date night with your partner or your family and just say, okay, we're going to do this together. So everybody's, on board. We're going to talk about it. We're going to answer questions or do it together.
Most kids don't want any furniture or anything from their parents' house. But I tell my kids, if you want something now, take it.
Yeah.
Because I don't need it anymore. I've really become, it really interests me or intrigues me, at certain stages of our lives, like where things become more important, your home, you want it to look nice, you buy things for it, you want to change the decor, you want to do this, you want to do that. And then for me, later in years, I'm like, these are dust collectors. Like, I want to give them away, take them,
No, thank you, Cheryl. No.
And Mark does the same. And they try and load some stuff off on me as well.
Yeah. What becomes our albatross, our stuff, right? And that's one of our conversations in our grief groups is, we're taught, programmed how to acquire stuff, to acquire things. But we don't have the resources. What happens when we lose those things? Even the California fires, like people are losing their homes, they're losing all their memories, their pictures, their art, their, family photos, like all that stuff.
Yeah.
So can you imagine the grief with all that is huge. And, it's nice that, they're getting shelter and set up, but, we should be going in there with grief teams.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
When you were saying about writing your own eulogy and planning your own party, I had to giggle because my family would go, Marg, no, no, you're going to throw out some F-bombs and it won't be sacred at all.
But it would be perfect because it would be, you know, a party that you planned, and it's who plans a better party for themselves than ourselves, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, again, that's a good point, Marg, right? Because then it really is honoring you, right? And I would imagine that people would then have the feeling of their loved one, being present, and they would be able to laugh and joke, as well as cry, which I think is important. And some
Absolutely.
of us judge people when we see that, right? Oh, look, they're laughing, or they're not sad enough. Right, Cheryl?
Yeah. Well, and you don't know how your end of life is going to be, right? You could pass away peacefully in your sleep with, no indication that, death is knocking on your door, or it can be long and drawn out. So whatever it is, the end result is the same. So the pre-work that we can do is easy for our loved ones, and to communicate those last communications that you have.
Yeah.
Right? You might not be in a state where you can tell somebody that you love them, or that you're sorry, or where you hid the key, or that you ran over their cat when in the snowstorm you didn't see it. What are your deep dark secrets? So
yeah, it's interesting because I'm also thinking about I used to do conflict resolution mediation in the community, and a lot of community cases came from families because they were in conflict over the will, right, or the belongings, and what was going to who, and and it really can really damage family relationships, which to me is another reason to have the conversations beforehand.
Yes.
Right. So that our children don't bicker with each other afterwards, or they know where things are at, and they can have their say there and then, rather than have to deal with, well, mom said, and
and mom said that to me too, so we get rid and that's unfortunately families do break up when there's a death in the family, because we failed to have those tough and tender conversations. It's so important, and the only thing that stops us is a lack of education and fear.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
I think it's time to take a break, so don't go away. We'll be back, and we have a wonderful Cheryl Pauchuck with us, and we're talking about grieving, death, dying, preparing, what happens when we're not prepared, and anything else you want to know. So put some questions in the chat, and we'll see you right after the break.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hepperlin Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Spiritual Center, Kitchener, Om Center for Spiritual Living, La Mesa, Satya Center, Center for Spiritual Living, North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for making New Thought Media Network a place to be. Please come be you. And remember, like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Welcome back. So I was just thinking, Cheryl, the topic mindful grief or mindful grieving. So when we talk about that, help us understand what that would mean.
So the biggest thing on mindful grief in the way I facilitate with my clients is, spending time with grief. Right? We don't like to address our feelings, and sometimes we can't even label them that we've had a loss and that we're experiencing grief. So the biggest thing in grief education is to identify it and to see what's there, because we always say that grief is a gamut of emotions. It can be conflicting emotions, usually is conflicting emotions.
Mm-hmm.
We can be, guilt, blame, shame is all in there. And it's just a mixed bag that can really take us down into a really dark, deep place and have us running down the street with our hair on fire and just, knocks us so off course. So being mindful is to really go inside and have a look and see what's going on, what's this about, and asking the questions and going beneath the grief to see what's really there and putting voice to it, right? We've been told to grieve alone, to not, express our emotions, don't cry. We go out into the world with what we say our Academy Award face on, right? They'll say, how are you? And say, oh, I'm fine, when you're not, right? Because one, you don't want to admit that, you're not holding it together well. And two, the person that's asking how you are doesn't really want to know, right?
Yeah.
They don't know what to do with grief. So mindfulness is, like I said, it's to me, it's an education, right? For themselves, getting the right tools to use and implementing them. So, mindfulness is a lot more than, doing yoga and meditating. It's going in and being with ourselves and seeing what's there and giving voice to our grief, because it needs to be heard.
That's interesting. It needs to be heard. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, it's, that's part of the journey, right? Is, on the 8-week program that we facilitate is we start looking at grief, like I always say, like 30,000 feet. And then every week we descend, we get a little closer to looking at our own grief. And then we eventually look at one particular relationship. But our grief is always a mixed bag of emotions, like I said. And, what causes us to grieve? What causes this, mix of emotions? And, when we sit and we can look at it and write it out and map it out and chart it out, within a particular relationship, we start looking at all our coulda, woulda, shouldas. We put burdens on ourselves, like I should have gone to the hospital, I should have made the phone call, I should have done this, or I could have done this better, I could have done this more. So it's things that we start blaming ourselves once we've had a loss. And this isn't necessarily just specifically applied to death. If we get fired from our job, it's like we grieve. It's like, oh, I could have done this better, I could have done this more, I could have done this differently. So we grieve those things, the coulda, woulda, shouldas. And we also grieve our hopes and dreams and expectations that we had for that relationship, right? Again, whether it's a partnership, any kind of relationship, again, even with a job or the death of somebody or a divorce, that we have hopes and dreams for the relationship, right? That we're going to retire, we're going to move to Mexico, our grandkids, grow up and do family trips, or you have attachments to a career, that you've got a promotion and you want to do XYZ, in this leadership role you have. And even working on a team project that doesn't have the outcome that the company wanted. We grieve those things, and when we don't process our feelings, emotions, that's, stops us from showing up fully in our life and living peacefully.
Yeah.
Grief robs us from our joy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, just the last point. Those are kind of our three top components of grief. And the last one is that, we either never expressed ourselves, or we didn't express ourselves to the point where we felt that we were heard. Something that was emotionally important to us. And, to find all those nuggets from all those three areas, put voice to that and share it with somebody who's actually listening is invaluable to us.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Very powerful. Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we do with the grief recovery method. And in my mindful grief, we do a lot of that, but we spend more time in inner focus and finding where the upset is. What is the grief about? What are the regrets?
Yeah.
What are you afraid of?
Right.
Because a lot of times we express it in anger, but it's not always anger. If we really look, it's usually fear.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd like to go back to regrets later, but what the question was brewing for me, you are a teacher, a coach, facilitator, and so you're working with clients, you're working with people. Has anybody spoken to you? I don't mean literally spoken to you, but spoken to you and you've learned a lesson from them, something that stands out for you that somebody taught you?
I think for me, in the seat that I have as a coach, a facilitator, is just, and I think we know that in theory, in our beliefs, in our education, but when you sit in a room of people in a death cafe or a grief group, we just realize how we're so similar, and we're afraid to voice our opinion, thinking, oh, they're going to think I'm crazy or over dramatic or whatever. So we get solace in identifying that I'm okay. This is normal, right? A lot of people feel like this. And the other big lesson for me in all of this is that grief is still so unique and individual, right? Our losses can be similar. Like we can all could be in a group where we've lost pets or, divorce groups or lost children or whatever it may be. So we have something in common, but how our grief is showing up for us is very individual. And it's so important for us not to show up and judge, critique, or try and fix, right? That's our go-to, especially men, right? They're the fixers, because people that are grieving aren't broken.
No.
We're grieving.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And it's
and so not saying, oh, I know how you feel.
That's right, because you don't.
Yeah.
We don't. Right?
Yeah.
We never do.
Yeah.
We never do.
Yeah.
And I use the example of, you can have 100 people at a funeral, and 100 people are there because they all know the person at the front of the room. But that relationship was unique. Nobody else in that room had the relationship you had with that person. You have the commonality that you've all lost this person that you care about and love on whatever level that is. So, and we're all individuals. So we all grieve different, and we all grieve our losses different.
Yeah. It's interesting when you put it that way. Think of all these different people with different stories about that person. And that's another thing that I've been to celebrations of life where people tell stories afterwards. What was your favorite memory about that person? Or can you think of a memorable time, something funny happened or whatever, right? to me, that again is just celebrating someone's life and celebrating the love and appreciation that we have for them.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's is one of my go-to pieces of advice for someone who doesn't know how to handle someone who's grieving, is to say, I didn't know this person, or I didn't know this person the way you know them. I would love for you to share a story that shows me your relationship with them. What's one of your favorite stories?
Yeah.
Right. And people are like, oh my God, that's such a great tool to have in my toolbox. Because, when your neighbor's husband dies, you don't know them really well. It's like, I don't know what to say. I didn't know them. I don't want to. And then we end up not even being in communication with our neighbor who needs us right now.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes it takes like, oh my God, I didn't know you guys really well, but I'd love to hear a story about Joe.
Yeah.
What's one of your favorite stories ever? Tell me about him and your relationship.
Yeah. And people are afraid to do that, but that's what actually people, a lot of people in grief need and want to do. They want to talk about their loved one.
That's right.
They want to tell you the memories or about that person that's not in their life in the same way anymore.
Yeah.
Because they always be in your life. It's just going to be, they're not present physically, but they're here, right? You've got them here.
That relationship lives on forever. Never lose that relationship, right?
Yeah.
Emphasis on form, hence comes our grief. But I lost my dad 1.5 years ago, and I have the best relationship with my dad now than I think I ever did.
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
I always think about that also, like how we can really shift our stories in our mind, right? We don't have to carry the story that we tell ourselves or told ourselves. We can change that and see it from a different perspective.
That's right.
So that we don't have that, whatever it is, angst, anger, shame, blame, or whatever. My husband jokes with me because I always tell him, his dad's around, like, don't worry about it. He says, so how did he get here from South Africa? I'm like, he's everywhere. He's not in South Africa. He's everywhere, right? Again, it's also our perception. We choose how we feel. We choose how we think. Although in the moments that we're going through a process, it doesn't feel that way.
That's right. Yeah.
Right?
And that's why we need to also have tools in our toolbox to be, I call a grief support buddy. Like, how do we show up for these people in our lives that we love and care about, who, are in the throes of grief? So being able to have, a resource like I'd love to have, to share a story, right? Not only pulls them out of their, the trauma of their experience, though they do need to address that, but it doesn't make it the loss all bad, right? Exactly. They remember the joyful times. They remember those special, funny moments, those romantic moments, those, the challenging times that they made it work. They, turned it into something fun, right?
Yeah, exactly.
To do that.
And not to be afraid to do things like that with somebody else, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So just show up, right? A lot of times, when people are grieving, sometimes their best day is just being able to comb their hair and brush their teeth, right? And that's okay if that's where they're at. But, we beat ourselves up because of these societal, programming conditions, the way we should be. And it just knocks us lower down the rung of, something we're trying to climb out of. So I think we need to, let ourselves off the hook with a lot of things and take time to be mindfully grateful, at the end of every day, and appreciate the little things. I got out of bed today. I washed my face today.
Yeah.
I called my mom today.
Yeah.
So,
Beautiful that there are support groups, that people can support each other, because that's what it's about. It's not about just me needing support. It's about being with somebody else in the same situation or similar, and being able to support them. So it's that reciprocal kind of thing. And like you said, you might hear something you never thought of that will just be like, oh my goodness, that's an aha moment for me.
Mhm.
Yeah. So tell us some. I always think people like to hear examples of, of experiences. So maybe tell us one or two. I want to say stories, but it's an experience of how this mindfulness program has helped people.
And how you communicate with your father. I want to know that too. You said you have a relationship with your father. So in that, can you share how you communicate with your father?
Yeah. Well, for me, I would just, obviously I've done, my own work with my own grief and relationships. And I always say the best thing we can do for ourselves is to do our work on our relationships. And, our parents are always big ones because they're our primary relationships that mold, how we show up in the world for the most part. And, just in that process. And it wasn't even, I had to sit down and have a conversation with my dad. It's like, well, you remember when I was 7 and you did this? And, because I could go through that and process it on my own. So when, I was visiting with my dad, that's not clouding my present moment time with him, right? I'm seeing him, this person before me, not the dad that I have in my head that I've been carrying around from the story since I was 7, right? So it's just so liberating to, let those rocks fall out of my knapsack that I drag around and just be fully present. And then when my dad passed, we talked about his, what he wanted out of life as his health challenges were increasing. And he said, I kind of just done everything I want to do. And I'm good. And, he died the way he wanted to. And I was so grateful for that. And, he had his will was in order. His funeral arrangements were all taken care of and paid for and everything. So, we could just be with the loss and be with the family and be with our grief, which was wonderful. But I really felt like when my dad, died, when he passed over, that he got to really see me. And because I was so free of all my stories. So I found that, quite a beautiful experience that I'm still enjoying today. And I just feel his presence. We just bought a piece of property here, and it's like, oh my God, did we do the right thing? Whatever. And saint signs and symbols, always follow thought. But a song that's really attached to my dad was playing in a restaurant as I was walking by to say, yeah, we're going to take this. So, so there's, when you stay open and acceptable to the communications that come through, it's so comforting. Comforting. I've had clients where, if they've lost somebody special, if it's been through suicide or even a maid death, which is becoming more and more popular and more available to us in Canada, especially in Ontario, that, like, oh, well, I don't want to think about February. February is a horrible month, when we lost, our daughter or whatever to suicide. But the whole month wasn't horrible. Name me 2 things that happened in the month of February that brought you joy. So it's just, mindfulness is about going in and breaking these thought patterns we have that hold us down and stop us from experiencing joy in the present moment. And this woman says, oh my God, I came up with 2. And I said, yeah, that's 2. And you got 28, 29 days. I think you can find more. So let's go in and find 3 more. Let's go in and find 5 more.
Beautiful.
February is not a terrible month. It's a bad day. Maybe she has a bad week. But it's, she's got perspective on it now. So
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I could see movement in people when they're able to do that, right? And so you're really moving through or with your grief. I remember hearing somebody, can't remember who it was, talking about it and saying, you never get over it. You learn to live with it. You learn to carry it with you.
Well, yeah, that kind of goes in with, time heals all wounds. Well, it doesn't,
No.
the amount of time it takes us, is the small actionable steps we take to move ourselves along.
Right.
So some people dive in and just say, well, I don't want to feel like this for very long, so I'm going to go in and do my work. And,
Yeah.
and other people, it just takes longer. We just meet everybody where they're at. That's their journey, and it's all perfect, right?
Absolutely.
But it's not the time that's healing the wound, right? No. It's, if you take the analogy of, you cut your finger, there's a lot that's happening in the body as coagulating and whatever is going on that heals that. So it's not time that heals that. The amount of time that the process in motion that is happening.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah. So it's, and everybody's on a different path. Everybody's different process. We all come from a different place, our own unique experience. And the most important thing is to be mindful and to get the tools that work, get rid of the ones that don't work. Like we have this myth to grieve alone. Well, that's been beat into us in movies and books and, marketing for thousands of years. And that's not true, right?
Absolutely.
We're not supposed to grieve alone. We're not supposed to grieve alone.
No.
Or, another big one is replace the loss. It's like, we lost our, dog Buddy. It's like, kids are upset and crying. It's like, oh, don't worry, we'll get another dog. It's like, well, no, we have to address the grief, right? It's nice to have another dog. That dog is not going to be the dog we lost. And we still have feelings of that loss.
Absolutely.
So it's a big job for parents to educate themselves on grief and death and dying, and know how to handle kids. And same for teachers or grandparents or any of our elders or teachers.
Yeah. Good points. Yeah, really good. And you, the thought while you were saying that came to me was, we don't grieve the same way for different people or different things.
Yes, it's always different. Every loss we have is a snowflake. Our grief is a different snowflake. Yeah, we could even lose, 3 dogs in our lifetime, and every loss of each one of those dogs is going to be completely different because our relationship with that dog is different. Yeah, and we're different. At each interval of our lives with these different pets. So we can't compare within ourselves and how we grieve, and we can't compare our grief to another's.
To another, absolutely,
I just came back to your word regret, and something that just surfaced for me when I was talking about when I was thinking about a loss of one of our dogs, and I wondered, having a regret is a way of holding on to them.
Yeah, that's what holds us back. And in the Grief Recovery Institute, we talk about, actually, if you Google guilt, is to, the feelings of being guilty is to have done something with the intention to cause harm. And we never want to cause harm. I don't think anybody here would ever do anything to intentionally cause harm, to evoke those feelings. So I always ask people, when they show up in their, doing their deep emotional work, when guilt comes up, to just, redefine the meaning that they've assigned to that word, because, guilt, blame, shame are big buzzwords right now in the self-care world that do a lot of damage. They've become program buzzwords that, feelings of guilt don't help us. So if we can put a different and a correct meaning on it, it loosens its power, it dissolves the power. And if you can just say, I regret, it's an easier, less heavy word for us to put into our vocabulary and our thinking. It's like, oh, I feel guilty, I didn't go visit grandma in the hospital. And just say, I regret that I didn't, spend more time with grandma before she died.
Yeah.
Big
It sounds much
energetic
better.
difference, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Energetic
Huge.
difference.
Yeah.
And we still need to resolve our regrets and to look
Mhm.
at them, because they can still weigh us down.
Mhm.
But whatever the tools we have, our end goal is to release ourselves from the suffering. And our suffering really comes from, all that dialogue that happens in our mind, all our coulda, woulda, shouldas, all the, I wish I'd done this, I wish I hadn't said that, and all those hopes and dreams and expectations, and the last one is about all the things that we didn't say on a deep emotional level that we need to say, right? It's like going back to the, experience with my dad. I said all those things to my dad doing my own work. Like I didn't actually say them to my dad to release them. So powerful, to do this work. And like I said, somebody doesn't have to be dead for you to do your relationship work to get rid of your grief that you're carrying around.
Right. Yeah. So we're coming to the end of the show.
Yeah.
So Cheryl, what would you like to leave our listeners and viewers with as we wrap up?
Gosh, so many things. One, get thee to a death cafe. Two,
that was the question. So if you Google Death Cafe, will they come up?
deathcafe.com is the universal platform, and a lot of them are listed there. Or you just put Death Cafe near me, or Death Cafe Chicago. Things will show up if they're there.
Okay.
And if it's not there, start one, because deathcafe.com has got outlined how you can start one in your area.
Fantastic.
So, and to do your work. Do your work on grief and loss, Grief Recovery Institute. I'm actually starting grief cafes in 2025. Hopefully when I get home, my next project. This is so important for us to give our grief a voice. And even if it's not in a public forum, in a group or whatever, just within yourself to mindfully go in and see what's there. And let it be heard, right? So when we put voice to our emotions, it loosens their grip that it has on us. That's why we pray out loud. That's why we sing, we chant. It's vibrational. And that's why I love my Reiki and prayer work is so powerful for grief.
Yeah. And bringing that together, that's also beautiful. Yeah. So thank you for that. I'm certainly going to look that up and see what's around. Where is home, if you don't mind me asking?
A home for me is, I'm about 3 hours north of Toronto on the shores of Lake Huron.
Okay.
Hampton, when I'm not in Mexico.
Beautiful. That's lovely. Okay.
Yeah.
And anything you want to wrap up with, Marg?
When you said about having that conversation, but not necessarily with the parent, for example, it doesn't have to be with the parent, as long as having it here is productive. I'm going to ponder that one.
Yes, that's your inside work, right?
Yes,
absolutely.
Inside work.
Yeah. That's
Thank you
great
for being here.
Yeah, it's interesting that does work. It really does. So if you haven't tried it, and you need to, for sure, give that a chance. I think for me as well is what I would say is, let's talk about it more and let's prepare for it more in a positive, happy, like you said, fun way. It does not have to be doom and gloom when we talk about our death and, what we want for when we go and all the rest of it, right? So the gift is in preparing and leaving that information behind that makes it easier for whoever it is that you're
education. It's talking. It's time to talk about the elephant in the room. And it's telling us time's up. So
absolutely.
To be continued.
Yes. Thank you so much, Cheryl. It's been wonderful having you, and enjoy the rest of your stay in Mexico and your new home in April when you get it there. And we'll see you again, hopefully, sometime.
Love to come back. Thank you.
Thank you. So please like, share, and subscribe. Help us get these shows and these wonderful guests sharings with us, experiences. And we'll see you